Imagine a galaxy where brutal hunters chase trophies to prove their strength. They thought they found the perfect pre-humanity. But instead of fear, they got something no warrior expected. A lesson, a challenge, and even a diploma. This isn't just survival. It's a story of how humans turned the game of trophies into the science of victory. The galaxy was wide, dark, and filled with mysteries that most species dared not explore. Among the stars moved the Hunter clan, a group of alien warriors known across worlds for their hunger for trophies. They were not content with food, wealth, or land. What they wanted most was proof of domination. Skulls, bones, or hides ripped from the bodies of the strongest creatures they could defeat. For them, trophies were not decoration. They were symbols of honor, of power, of fear. Every member of the clan wore these symbols proudly, stitched into their armor, displayed across their ships, or carved into the halls of their ancestral chambers. For centuries, their hunts had been successful. They crushed beast after beast, from massive reptilian titans that towered over forests to insectoid swarms that covered entire plains. Wherever they landed, they left silence behind. Civilizations that had resisted them had been broken, their proudest champions reduced to ornaments. The galaxy whispered in fear of the Hunter clan, because no one had ever taught them humility. To the hunters, every living thing was prey, waiting to be tagged, bagged, and remembered on a wall. But then they found Earth. At first, they laughed when their scouts reported humans. By galactic standards, humans looked fragile soft skin, small teeth, weak claws, no natural armor. Compared to the monsters they had fought before, humans seemed unworthy, even of being hunted. But arrogance ran deep in the Hunter clan. If humans were weak, then crushing them would still make a fine story. And so, with thunderous warships cutting through the skies, they prepared to descend. The humans, however, were not afraid. They watched the skies too, but with eyes sharpened by curiosity, not terror. Humanity had survived countless challenges on Earth's ages, plagues, predators, far larger and stronger. And in every case, humans had not simply fought back with claws or brute strength. They had fought back with something far deadlier, their minds. When the hunters landed, they expected to be greeted with fear. Instead, they found humans standing ready, not with weapons of destruction, but with ideas, strategy, and a strange confidence that unsettled the predators. The hunters could not understand it at first. How could a species so physically plain meet their eyes without trembling? How could they prepare for battle without rage or panic? The truth was simple. The hunters wanted trophies. The humans wanted something else. This understanding, learning, building, where the hunters only saw prey, the humans saw opportunity. The first contact between the two would not be just a clash of weapons. It would be the beginning of a lesson neither side would ever forget. The hunters arrived with the sound of roaring engines and thunder that shook the ground. Their ships, dark and jagged, split the skies like blades. To most worlds, this sight meant doom. It meant the start of the hunt, the beginning of chaos, the fall of civilizations. The hunters expected the same on Earth. They prepared their armor, sharpened their blades, and loaded their plasma rifles, ready to spill blood and hang new trophies on their walls. But what they saw on the ground was not what they had imagined. Humans did not run. Humans did not hide. Instead, they stood firm, watching the massive ships descend. Soldiers lined up in formation, scientists adjusted strange devices, and civilians looked up with a mix of awe and curiosity. It was not fear, it was preparation. The leader of the hunter squad, a towering figure named Varkesh, stepped forward once the landing ramps dropped. His armor was decorated with the skulls of giant beasts, each one polished until it gleamed. In his clawed hand, he carried a staff tipped with the jawbone of some long-dead titan. He expected his presence alone to bring the humans to their knees. But the human commander, a woman named Dr. Elaine Carter, simply adjusted her glasses and gave him a steady look. "You've come for a hunt," she said calmly. "But what you'll find here is a lesson." Varkesh tilted his head, confused. To the hunters, prey was supposed to beg or scream, not lecture. Yet Carter's words carried no fear. Behind her, rows of humans carried strange tools and machines. They were not weapons in the traditional sense. Not plasma rifles, not laser cannons, not blades that cut through steel. They were devices of science, projectors, drones, holographic systems, and something that looked like an oversized chalkboard. The hunters growled. Was this a joke? Where were the guns? Where was the resistance? Then the demonstration began. The humans activated their devices, and instantly the empty field filled with glowing patterns. Drones soared into the air, creating maps of stars, diagrams of atoms, and moving shapes that explained theories of physics. Machines hummed as they displayed mathematics, biology, and engineering on massive holograms. The humans were not preparing to fight with muscle or teeth. They were preparing to fight with knowledge. Varkesh snarled. What trick is this? Where are your weapons? Carter smiled. This is our weapon. It is sharper than any blade you carry. The hunters were unsettled. They'd come expecting screams and resistance, but instead, they were being challenged in a way they had never experienced. No one had ever stood before them and offered not blood, but wisdom. For the first time in centuries, the hunters felt something they had nearly forgotten: doubt. As the night sky filled with human inventions and the voices of scientists explaining concepts the hunters had never imagined, one truth became clear: the hunt had already changed. For the hunter clan's strength had always been measured in blood. Whoever brought home the most dangerous trophies was honored with songs, feasts, and power. But standing before the humans, that ancient definition of strength began to falter. The glowing holograms and dancing drones puzzled the hunters. They could crush metal with their fists, leap across canyons, and tear through beasts 3 times their size, but they could not grasp what the humans were showing them. Strange equations floated in the air, describing forces they had never named. Models of DNA spun like spirals of light, revealing the very code of life. Machines that could heal wounds, purify water, and create energy hummed softly, proof of a mastery the hunters did not understand. Varkesh's warriors shifted uneasily. They had never seen prey behave like this. They whispered among themselves, asking if this was sorcery, if the humans were tricksters. But Carter spoke again, her voice firm and calm. You hunt for trophies because you believe victory comes from destruction. But humanity has learned something different. True strength is not in what you kill, it is in what you build, what you discover, what you teach. The words stung. To the hunters, they sounded almost insulting. But at the same time, there was an edge to them that could not be ignored. The humans were not begging for mercy, and they were not surrendering. Instead, they were challenging the hunters to see strength in a way they had never considered. The hunters gripped their weapons tighter. Varkesh raised his staff, ready to end the display with blood. But then something happened that froze even the fiercest warriors. A child stepped forward. She was no soldier, no scientist, just a young girl clutching a simple notebook. Her voice trembled at first, but she began to explain the stars drawn in her book. She pointed up at the sky, naming constellations, explaining distances, and describing how humans had dreamed of the stars long before they had the power to reach them. The hunter stared in silence. This was no warrior, and yet she was not afraid. To her, the hunters were not monsters. They were students, whether they realized it or not. For the first time in generations, the hunter clan did not feel like predators. They felt like learners standing before teachers. And that realization was more unsettling than any battle they had ever fought. Varkesh growled low, uncertain. The humans were weak in body, yes. But in this strange contest, they were stronger than any beast he had ever faced. The hunters had wanted a trophy. Instead, they had been handed a challenge: prove that they could understand, or admit that they were not as mighty as they believed. And in the heart of every hunter, pride burned. They could not walk away. The challenge had been set. The hunters had crossed galaxies in search of prey, but now they found themselves seated in front of glowing human machines, watching strange images flicker across the air. Their claws twitched nervously as they tried to make sense of what they saw. Never before had prey dared to teach them. To the hunters, this was not war, it was humiliation. Yet something deeper inside them was stirred: curiosity. Dr. Elaine Carter noticed this spark and pressed forward. You've mastered claws, teeth, and weapons, she said, her voice steady. But have you mastered understanding? Let us show you what strength truly is. The lesson began with something simple: fire. A hologram appeared, showing a human figure striking two stones together. Sparks flew and flames grew. The hunters tilted their heads. Fire was nothing new. Used it to burn forests and scorch enemies. But Carter explained how fire had not just been destruction, it had been the first step in science. With fire, humans had learned to cook food, melt metal, forge tools, and eventually power engines that carried them into the skies. The hunters shifted uncomfortably. They had used fire, yes, but never like this. To them, fire was a weapon. To humans, it had been the beginning of civilization. Next came mathematics. Equations danced in the air, glowing like constellations. Numbers turned into shapes, shapes into patterns, and patterns into technology. Humans showed how the same rules that measured the stars also guided the flight of ships, the forging of weapons, and the building of cities. The hunters grunted in frustration. Numbers were for record-keeping and trade, not for power. Yet, here were humans showing that numbers were the key to mastering the universe itself. Then came biology. A glowing model of DNA spun before their eyes. Carter explained how life carried codes written not in words, but in the very structure of its being. The hunters, who had collected trophies of bones and hides for centuries, had never considered that life was more than muscle, and bone. It was a puzzle, a design, something to be understood instead of simply broken. The hunters listened. At first, they growled and hissed, their pride resisting the idea that prey could lecture them. But the longer they stayed, the more their pride cracked. The knowledge was powerful, undeniable, and unlike any trophy they had ever claimed. Varkesh clenched his jaw. For the first time in his life, he realized the truth. His strength, his trophies. His battles, all of it was a shadow compared to what humans were showing. His people had mastered destruction. Humans had mastered creation. When the lesson ended, the field was quiet. The hunters did not roar, they did not threaten. They simply sat in silence, their eyes reflecting the holograms that still floated in the air. For the first time in centuries, the hunters were not predators. They were students. Though the hunters had listened in silence, their pride burned like a fire in their chests. They were a people raised on conquest, trained from childhood to believe that trophies were the only proof of greatness. To them, bones and skulls were history books, written in blood and scars. Now these humans, fragile, skin-wrapped beings, were telling them that true power was not in destruction but in creation. The words rattled inside their minds like thunder in a storm. Varkesh rose to his feet, his towering form casting a long shadow across the humans. His warriors growled low, their mandibles clicking in anger. "You speak as though you are stronger," he snarled, his voice booming like a drum. "But your bodies are weak. Your claws are soft. If not for these machines, you would already be dust beneath our boots. What honor is there in numbers? What glory is there in fire that does not burn your enemies?" The humans did not flinch. Dr. Carter stood firm, her glasses catching the glow of the holograms. "Glory fades," she replied calmly. "Bones turn to dust. But knowledge endures. We don't need to destroy to prove we are strong. We build, we adapt, we pass on our lessons. That is why we are still here. That is why we will always endure." Her words were like arrows, piercing through the armor of the hunter's arrogance. But arrogance is not easily defeated. One of Varkesh's lieutenants, a fierce warrior named Grath, slammed his blade into the ground. Sparks flew as he roared, "Strength must be tested. If your knowledge is so powerful, then let it save you from us." The challenge echoed across the field. The hunters beat their chests, their voices rising in a thunderous chant. They were not ready to abandon their way of life, not ready to accept that prey could be teachers. Pride demanded battle. Carter exchanged a quick glance with her team. She knew violence was not the answer. Violence would only confirm the hunters' beliefs. Instead, she raised her hand. "If it's a test you want," she said, "then it will not be a test of claws or blades. It will be a test of minds, a contest.
Ow.
Your strength against our knowledge." The hunters growled in confusion. A contest. No one had ever dared propose such a thing to them, yet their pride was hooked. To refuse would look like fear. To accept would risk humiliation. Varkesh stepped forward, his eyes glowing with challenge. "Very well," he rumbled. "We will face your contest. If we win, your world belongs to us, and your bones will decorate our halls. If you win, no, we will hear your so-called lesson." The deal was struck. The humans had not stopped the hunt, they had transformed it. No longer would it be a simple battle of claws and teeth. It would be something greater, something far more dangerous to the hunters, a battle of ideas. The hunt had begun, but it was no longer about trophies, it was about truth. The hunters had never faced anything like this before. Their lives had been built on the clash of weapons, on roars and bloodshed, on the simplicity of predator and prey. But now, the humans had challenged them to something Alina, contests not of muscles, but of minds. Varkesh and his warriors gathered in a tight circle. Their voices were low and tense. Some snarled that it was beneath them, that to play games with prey was dishonorable. Others argued that refusing would show weakness, and weakness was death. In the end, pride forced their hand. They would accept. The humans wasted no time. Carter and her team set up what looked like a great arena of light. Projectors formed glowing platforms, each one covered in symbols, puzzles, and patterns. Drones buzzed overhead, projecting challenges into the air riddles of logic, problems of engineering, and tests of observation. The hunters stepped forward warily. Their armor gleamed, their claws sharp, but none of that mattered here. For the first time, their weapons were useless. The first challenge was simple, or so it seemed. A great holographic bridge appeared, half complete, stretching across a glowing abyss. To cross, one had to finish the design using blocks of light, each shaped differently. The humans demonstrated fitting the pieces together with ease until the bridge stood solid. Then they gestured for the hunters to try. Grath, the loudest of Varkesh's lieutenants, growled and stepped forward. His claws fumbled at the glowing shapes, forcing them together with brute strength. The blocks resisted, refusing to fit. He snarled in frustration, smashing the pieces, but the bridge collapsed, dropping him into the holographic void. Though it was only an illusion, the roar of laughter from the humans stung worse than pain. Next, a young human child walked forward, calmly sliding the pieces into place. The bridge lit up, whole and strong. The hunters stared, stunned that such a small, fragile creature had succeeded where their fiercest warrior had failed. The second challenge was harder, a puzzle of numbers and patterns. Humans explained the rules quickly, showing how numbers repeated in cycles, predicting the next step in a sequence. The hunters tried to guess, roaring when their answers failed. The humans, by contrast, wrote equations with ease, solving the riddle in moments. One by one, the tests continued. Navigation by stars, building a simple circuit, balancing chemical reactions. Each time the hunters stumbled. Their claws were sharp, but their minds had never been sharpened in this way. The humans, however, thrived. Children outsmarted seasoned warriors. Elders explained with calm clarity what no hunter could grasp. By the end of the first day, the hunters stood silent. Their pride was battered, their roars quieted. Varkesh alone remained defiant, his burning eyes fixed on Carter. "You play games?" he spat. "But games prove nothing. Knowledge without strength is empty." Carter did not flinch. She simply smiled. "Then tomorrow we will show you how knowledge creates strength." The hunters had come for trophies. But with every contest, they realized something terrifying. The humans were not prey. They were something far more dangerous, teachers. The next morning, the arena of light transformed. Where once there had been puzzles and glowing bridges, now there were machines half-built, incomplete, and waiting to be finished. The hunters narrowed their eyes. These were not weapons of war, not the plasma rifles or pulse cannons they were used to. Instead, the humans had prepared engines, water purifiers, and wind turbines. Dr. Carter stepped forward. "You say knowledge is empty," she told Varkesh. "Then watch how it builds power." The first challenge was simple. Take pieces of metal, wires, and a spinning wheel, and create something that produced light. To the hunters, this was nonsense. Light came from fire, or from the glowing crystals of their homeworld, not from scraps of junk. They growled in confusion, trying to force pieces together without understanding. Sparks flew, but nothing more. Meanwhile, the humans worked with calm confidence. A boy barely into his teens wrapped copper wire around a nail, connected it to a wheel, and spun it. Instantly, a bulb lit up, glowing softly in the air. The hunters stumbled back, their eyes wide. A child had just created light not from fire, not from destruction, but from understanding. The second challenge was harder. A large tank of murky, filthy water sat in the arena. The hunters wrinkled their noses. Water was life, and yet this was poison. Carter challenged them, make it drinkable. The hunters roared in protest. This is trickery. This is not strength. Grath spat, his claws scraping the ground. But Carter only gestured toward the equipment laid out. Filters, charcoal, sand, and simple pumps. The humans demonstrated again. With patience and precision, they built a filter from simple materials. Within minutes, clear water dripped into a glass. Carter held it up, drinking it without fear. This, she said, is strength. The power to give life, not take it. The hunters stared, their pride burning, but deep inside, something cracked. They had trophies of 1,000 dead beasts, yet none of them could create life-giving water. The third challenge broke them further. A massive, lifeless field was projected onto the arena floor. Make it grow, Carter instructed. Seeds were provided, along with tools, soil, and fertilizer. The hunters sneered. Growth was slow. Growth was weak. But then the humans showed how, with care and knowledge, seeds sprouted into green shoots in a fraction of the time. Technology accelerated what would normally take weeks. The arena filled with the smell of fresh earth and living plants. For the hunters, who had spent centuries chasing death, the sight of life springing from nothing was more shocking than any battlefield. Varkesh clenched his fists. He had come expecting easy prey. Instead, he found himself watching miracles. Every display chipped away at his belief that destruction was the only form of strength. By the end of the day, the hunters stood silent once again. They had lost contests of wits. Now they had lost contests of creation. Humans had given them something no trophy ever had doubt. No doubt for the Hunter clan was more dangerous than any weapon. The Hunter clan had never known doubt. Their history was written in hunts, their stories carved into bones, their victories measured in blood. To question the way of trophies was unthinkable. Yet, as they watched humans create light, clean water, and green life from empty soil, the seeds of doubt began to take root in their hearts. That night, the hunters gathered in their camp outside the human settlement. Fires crackled, casting jagged shadows across their armor. Varkesh sat at the center, his massive frame silent, his staff planted firmly in the earth. Around him, his lieutenants argued fiercely. This is trickery, Groth spat, slamming his claws against a stone. They distract us with toys and illusions. Real strength is in battle, not in puzzles and seeds. Another warrior, smaller but thoughtful, shook his head. No, Grath. You saw the light. You drank the water. You felt the ground shake when their machines roared to life. That was no trick. It was power. The camp grew restless. Pride demanded they reject the humans' teachings, but deep inside, a quiet truth gnawed at them. For the first time, they wondered if their way was incomplete. Varkesh said nothing at first. His burning eyes stared into the fire, seeing not flames but the glowing images of the day's lessons. He remembered the child building a bridge, the boy spinning a wheel to make light, the plants sprouting from barren soil. None of these things could be won by brute strength. It required patience, thought, and knowledge. Finally he spoke, his voice heavy. We came for trophies. We expected prey. But what we found are builders, teachers. His words sent ripples through the clan. To admit such a thing was dangerous. It meant their entire tradition could be questioned. Yet, even as the hunters growled in resistance, they could not erase what they had seen. Meanwhile, in the human camp, Carter and her team discussed the day's events. Some were uneasy. They're predators, one scientist whispered. They won't give up their ways so easily. Tomorrow they may strike with blades instead of questions. Carter nodded but remained calm. It's why we must keep teaching. If we fight them with weapons, we become no different than what they expect. But if we fight them with knowledge, we plant a seed that may one day grow into something far greater than victory. The next morning, when the hunters returned to the arena, they were quieter. Their roars had softened to low growls, their eyes no longer blazing with arrogance, but flickering with unease. They had not come for trophies anymore, not truly. They had come because curiosity had taken root, though none of them would admit it. And deep inside, Varkesh wondered, what if the humans were right? What if strength was not in trophies, but in understanding? The thought was small, dangerous, and unwelcome. But once planted, it refused to leave. By now, the hunters had seen more than they wished to admit. Every challenge set before them had cracked their certainty. Where they relied on claws and brute force, the humans had relied on something invisible, yet undeniable. The hunters began to notice a strange pattern. No matter how large, how strong, or how fierce the obstacle, the humans always found a way around it. The humans' advantage was not in their bodies, but in their minds. Unlike the hunters who clung to traditions without question, humans asked why. Why does fire burn? Why do stars move? Why does water flow? And with each answer, they built tools, machines, and systems that gave them power far beyond their physical limits. To prove this point, Dr. Carter arranged a demonstration. In the arena of light, two massive boulders appeared, projected but heavy enough to resist all but the strongest effort. Varkesh snarled and stepped forward. With a roar, he planted his feet and pressed his claws into the rock, straining until his muscles bulged like coiled steel. At last, with a shudder, he managed to push the boulder a few feet. His warriors cheered, their voices echoing with pride. Then Carter gave the same task to a human engineer. He did not strain, he did not roar. Instead, he set up a simple lever, a beam balanced on a rock. With one push, using far less strength, the boulder rolled twice as far as Varkesh had moved it. The demonstration was clear. Brute force had limits. Knowledge broke those limits. Another test followed. A heavy gate blocked the arena. Grath charged forward, slamming his shoulder into it until the ground shook. The gate did not budge. He roared in frustration, his pride bleeding with every failed attempt. Then a human child stepped forward with a small key, turned it in the lock, and swung the gate open effortlessly. The lesson was undeniable. Strength without understanding was wasted effort. Varkesh's pride twisted painfully inside him. He wanted to deny it, to roar that the humans cheated, that their tricks meant nothing. But deep down, he knew the truth. The humans had found power in simplicity. They did not waste energy smashing obstacles. They used knowledge to slip past them. The hunters exchanged uneasy glances. For centuries they had worshipped destruction, believing it made them untouchable. Yet here stood humans, proving with every contest that intelligence was the sharpest weapon of all. Carter's voice carried across the arena, calm but firm. Strength fades, bodies fail. But the mind endures, passing knowledge from one generation to the next. That is why we have outlasted every predator. That is why we are not prey. The hunters had come for trophies. Instead, they were being handed truths they could not ignore. And with every truth, the balance of power shifted further away from their claws and closer to the humans' words. For the first time, the hunters realized they were not teaching fear. They were being taught humility. As the contests continued, the hunter clan found itself divided. For centuries, they had been united by a single belief. Strength was proven through trophies. But now that belief was crumbling. The humans had shown them light born from metal and wire, water drawn clean from filth, plants grown from barren soil, and gates opened not by force, but by understanding. Each lesson chipped away at their certainty, and unity began to fracture. Around the campfires at night, arguments grew louder. Grath, the fiercest of Varkeshli's lieutenants, spat venom with every word. "These are tricks," he growled, pounding his chest. "Machines, toys, illusions. What value is there in strength that hides behind tools? They mock us. They shame us. Tomorrow, we should tear them apart and mount their skulls on our walls." A younger warrior spoke hesitantly, his voice trembling under Grath's glare. But the water was real. Plants were real. I drank and I ate. No trick could do that. If prey can create life, is that not strength as well? Others murmured agreement. A few even admitted they felt shame at their failures in the contests. To lose to warriors was one thing, but to lose to children, this wounded their pride most of all. Varkesh sat apart, silent, His burning eyes shifted between the fire and the stars above. He was torn. His pride screamed for battle, for blood, for the old way, but his instincts whispered something else. He had seen the lever move the boulder, the key open the gate, the seed grow into food. These things could not be denied. If he ignored them, he risked leading his clan into blindness. The split in the clan grew wider with each passing day. Some wanted to end the contest and reclaim their honor with violence. Others wanted to continue learning, to see what more the humans could teach. The hunters had never faced this before. They had fought beasts, armies, and storms, but never themselves. Meanwhile, the humans watched carefully. Carter and her team saw the division growing. "This is our chance," one whispered. "If they turn on each other, they will leave us alone." But Carter shook her head. "No, if they turn on each other, they remain what they have, always been predators, lost in blood. But if they change, if they truly learn, then they will leave here not as enemies, but as allies." The next day, when the hunters returned to the arena, their eyes told the story. Some glared with fury, eager for blood. Others avoided human eyes, ashamed but curious, and Varkesh himself. He carried both emotions, pride and doubt, like a storm raging inside his chest. The cracks in the clan were spreading. And once cracks appear, it is only a matter of time before something breaks. The contests had lasted for many days, each one eroding the hunter's certainty. But on the 11th day, everything changed. It was not a test of puzzles or machines this time. It was something far more powerful, something the hunters had never expected from prey. That morning, Carter gathered the clan into the arena. There were no glowing holograms, no heavy boulders, no gates or seeds. Instead, she presented something small, a book. Its cover was worn, its pages yellowed by age. She held it up, her voice carrying across the field. "This," she said, "is humanity's greatest trophy." The hunters shifted uneasily. Grath snarled in disgust. "A dead tree? What use is that? You insult us with scraps of paper?" But Carter only smiled. She opened the book and began to read. Her words painted pictures in the air, stories of discovery, of hardship, of triumph, tales of humans who had braved storms, crossed oceans, and reached the stars not through brute force, but through perseverance and knowledge passed from one generation to the next. The hunters listened despite themselves. The book held no claws, no teeth, no trophies. Yet it carried power, the power of memory, of lessons preserved so that one person's struggle could become another's strength. Varkesh leaned forward, his burning eyes narrowing. He felt something stir inside him, something he had not felt since his youth: wonder. The idea that knowledge could outlive flesh, that a story could outlast bones, unsettled him deeply. His trophies hung in his ship, silent and decaying. This fragile book, however, carried voices that still spoke centuries after their owners had turned to dust. The realization cut like a blade. Perhaps the humans were right. Perhaps their strength truly was different. Not the strength of claws, but of ideas. The moment reached its peak when Carter closed the book and handed it to a hunter. Hesitant, the warrior took it, his claws cradling the fragile object with surprising care. He opened a page and stared at the strange markings. He could not read them, but he felt the weight of what they represented. "This," Carter said softly, "is how we carry our trophies. Not bones, not skulls, but knowledge, shared, preserved, and passed on. This is why we endure." The hunters were silent. Even Grath, who always roared for blood, had no words. For the first time, the idea that their way of life might not be eternal had taken root. Varkesh stood slowly, his gaze locked on Carter. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Ooh, you speak of trophies that do not rot, of strength that outlives flesh. Perhaps." He paused, his pride warring with his growing doubt. "Perhaps there is more to victory than we believed." It was a small admission, but it was enough. The turning point had come. The hunter clan had stepped onto a path they could never fully turn away from. The next day, the humans prepared something different. No contests, no puzzles, no machines humming in the background. Instead, the arena was lined with chairs and benches. At the center stood a large table stacked with objects the hunters had never seen before. Books. scrolls, maps, and devices that glowed faintly with stored information. Dr. Carter stepped forward, her voice calm but steady. You came to take trophies from us. But today, we give you something else. A gift. The hunters bristled. They were predators, not beggars. To accept a gift from prey was shameful. A curiosity tugged at them. Slowly they approached, their claws clicking against the stone floor. Carter held up a simple device, no larger than her palm. With a touch, it lit up, revealing images of stars, galaxies, and countless worlds. This, she said, is a library. It holds more knowledge than any single human could ever memorize. History, science, medicine, engineering, everything we have learned. Preserved so it will never be lost. The hunter's eyes widened. It thought the book was powerful, but this was something greater. To them, trophies were physical proof of conquest. Yet here was proof of something far stronger. The ability to carry wisdom across generations and even across stars. Varkesh took the device carefully in his clawed hand, expected it to feel fragile, but instead it pulsed with energy, almost alive. He tapped it clumsily, and suddenly the device projected a glowing diagram into the air, the inner workings of a starship engine. His warriors leaned forward in awe, their eyes reflecting the light. Carter continued. You can kill a beast once, and you have meat for a day. But if you understand how fire works, how energy flows, how engines move, then you carry power for all time. This is what humanity offers you. Not trophies, not skulls. Knowledge. Grath snarled, though his voice was weaker now. Why would you give this to us? If we learn, we will use it against you. Carter shook her head. Perhaps. But knowledge once given cannot be taken back. And knowledge changes those who carry it. Use it for war, and you will see its limits. Use it for creation, and you will see its true strength. The hunters exchanged uneasy glances. Some growled, others muttered, but none could deny the pull of the glowing library in Varkesh's hands. For centuries, they had lived by taking. Now, for the first time, they were being offered something freely, something more valuable than any bone or skull. Varkesh looked at Carter with a mix of suspicion and respect. You give us this gift, but what do you want in return? Carter smiled. Nothing. Only that you remember, the greatest trophies are not what you take, but what you learn. Silence followed. The hunters were predators, but in that silence they began to wonder if they could become something more. Not all the hunters were ready to accept what the humans had shown. For every warrior who leaned forward in curiosity, there was another who recoiled in anger. None burned hotter than Grath. To him, the contests were humiliation, the gifts an insult, and the humans nothing more than weak prey pretending to be gods. That night, while the clan gathered around the fire, Grath stood tall and roared. His voice thundered through the camp. We are hunters, not students, not scribes. We do not beg for scraps of wisdom from prey. We take what we want and we leave behind silence. This teaching weakens us. It poisons us. If we follow these humans, we will forget who we are. Many roared in agreement, pounding their chests in rhythm. Pride still lived strong in their hearts, and Grath's words fed it. He slammed his blade into the ground, sparks flying. Tomorrow, I will end this farce. Enough of contests and lessons. Enough of books and glowing toys. We will take their skulls and we will mount them high, to remind the galaxy what it means to cross the hunter clan. But not everyone cheered. Some looked away in shame, remembering the clear water, the green shoots of life, the glowing library. They had tasted something beyond blood and bone, and though they would not admit it, part of them longed for more. Varkesh sat in silence, watching the rebellion unfold. Inside him, a storm raged. He respected Grath's strength, but he also knew the truth. Knowledge was power, and denying it would doom them to stagnation. Still, to openly challenge Grath risked splitting the clan in two. At dawn, Grath made good on his promise. He marched into the arena, roaring, his blade drawn. The humans stood ready, but not with weapons. Carter raised her hand, calm as ever. You would end this with blood, she said. But what then? Another skull for your wall. Another story told in firelight, soon forgotten. Or, you could win something greater, something eternal. Grath snarled, his eyes blazing. Enough. We will see if your knowledge can stop a blade. But before he could strike, Varkesh stepped into his path. The two titans clashed, their voices shaking the air. No, Grath, Varkesh growled. You will not shame us further. If you cannot see the truth in what we have learned, then you are blind. The camp froze. A leader standing against his own lieutenant was unheard of. Groth roared in fury, but Varkesh stood firm, his claws spread wide, not to kill, but to stop the destruction of everything they had begun to discover. In that moment, the clan realized something terrifying. The humans had not just planted seeds of doubt, they had planted seeds of change. And now the Hunter clan itself stood on the edge of transformation or civil war. The clash between Varkesh and Grath shook the Hunter clan to its core. Never before had their unity been tested this way. For generations, their leaders were chosen by strength alone. Whoever brought home the greatest trophies. Whoever crushed the fiercest beasts. But now, for the first time, leadership meant something else. It meant deciding whether the hunters would cling to the old ways or step into something new. The clan gathered in a great circle, their eyes glowing in the firelight. Grath stood tall, his blade dripping with sparks where it had struck the ground. His voice thundered. Varkesh has been poisoned by the words of prey. He no longer seeks trophies, no longer values strength. He is weak, and weakness is death. If he will not lead us to blood, then I will. Roars of agreement shook the air, but they were not unanimous. Many remembered the contests. They remembered the clean water, the green plants, the glowing books. Some saw truth in Varkesh's silence, in the way he looked not at bones but at stars. Varkesh stepped forward, his towering form calm but unyielding. I am not weak, he growled. I have hunted longer than you, Grath. I have taken more trophies than any warrior here. But what have they given me? Dust. Silence. Empty pride. The humans have shown us strength that endures, strength that creates, strength that outlives flesh. If you cannot see it, then you are the blind one. The circle fell into chaos. Some roared for Grath, some for Varkesh. The hunters were not only divided, they were on the brink of tearing themselves apart. Then Carter stepped forward. She did not raise her voice, yet the silence that followed was heavier than any roar. You fight to decide what strength is, she said. But perhaps your trial should not be against each other. Let your trial be knowledge itself. Let us give you one final test. If Grath is right, you will crush us easily. But if Varkesh is right, then you will see the truth. The hunters shifted uneasily. A trial of knowledge, not claws. A challenge that would decide their leader and perhaps their future. Pride demanded they accept. Grath snarled. Very well, one last test. And when I win, your skulls will hang from my hall. Varkesh nodded slowly. And if you lose, Grath, you will accept that our path must change. The deal was struck. The clan had never faced such a trial before. Not a battle of weapons, but a battle of minds. For the hunters, it was unthinkable. For the humans, it was the moment everything had led to. As the fires burned low and the stars wheeled above, the stage was set. The Hunter clan's future blood, or knowledge. Destruction or creation would be decided not by the swing of a blade, but by the power of an idea. The arena was prepared at dawn. The humans worked through the night, setting up the final challenge. It was not a contest of brute force or cunning traps, but something far more dangerous for the hunters. A problem that required cooperation, patience, and intelligence. At the center stood a massive machine half-built, its frame of steel and wires looming like the skeleton of a giant beast. Next to it, a projection displayed a distant world, barren and lifeless. Carter explained calmly, "This is the challenge. Complete this machine, and it will make the dead world live again. Fail, and it will remain empty. This is the difference between destruction and creation. This is the future of strength." The hunters growled uneasily. They had no knowledge of machines, no patience for wires and bolts. Grath smirked, his claws tapping against his blade. A trick. A toy. What use is this to us? Varkesh stepped forward, his voice heavy. It is not a trick, Grath. It is a test. You boast of strength and show it, not with claws, but with hands steady enough to build. The clan roared in approval. The trial had begun. The machine was complex. Humans guided the process, giving instructions but never lifting a hand. It was the hunters who had to work. They struggled. Claws fumbled with delicate wires, and their patience snapped like brittle twigs. Some roared in frustration, ready to smash the device to pieces. But others began to adapt. They learned to use gentler touches to fit pieces together with care instead of force. Slowly, to their own surprise, the hunters realized that creation carried its own kind of strength. It was not the thrill of blood, but the satisfaction of progress. Grath grew restless. He snarled at every failure, tearing pieces apart in rage. "This is weakness. This is slavery to prey," shouted. His section of the machine remained broken, lifeless. Varkesh, however, listened carefully. He studied the humans' diagrams, asked questions, and even guided his warriors with patience instead of roars. Piece by piece, his section of the machine came alive, wires humming, lights flickering, gears turning. Hours passed. Sweat dripped from human brows, and the hunter's armor was stained with grime. But at last, under Varkesh's leadership, the machine shuddered, roared, and came to life. A beam of light shot from its core, striking the projection of the barren world. Slowly, impossibly, the dead land transformed. Water spread across valleys, plants burst from the soil, and the air shimmered with life.
Ow.
The hunters gasped, their eyes wide with awe. For the first time, they saw power not in death, but in rebirth. The machine stood as proof. Creation was the ultimate strength. Carter's voice was steady as she looked at the clan. "This is your choice. Will you follow Grath, who offers you more bones for your walls? Or will you follow Varkesh, who has shown you a strength that builds worlds?" The hunters fell silent. Even the fiercest warriors could not deny what they had seen. The final test had spoken. The clan stood in heavy silence after the machine's triumph. The projection of the once barren world now shimmered with oceans and forests, a vision that burned itself into every hunter's memory. They had never seen such a victory not taken by claws, but built by hands guided by knowledge. For a moment even the fiercest warriors were speechless, but Grath could not accept it. His pride, his rage, his entire identity screamed against what he had witnessed. He stepped forward, blade raised, his voice a roar that shook the air. "Lies, tricks, and illusions. This is no strength. This is cowardice wrapped in light. Varkesh has been deceived, and you with him." The crowd shifted, growls and murmurs mixing. Some wavered, their pride still clinging to the old way. But many more lowered their eyes, unable to deny the truth. The machine had worked. The dead world had come alive. That was no illusion. Varkesh stepped forward, meeting Grath's furious gaze. His voice was calm, but iron-edged every word. "You are blind, Grath. You see only what can be killed, never what can be created. That is why you fail." Grath snarled and lunged, his blade flashing. The clan roared, forming a circle as the two titans clashed. Sparks flew as steel met steel, claws raked against armor, and the ground shook under their weight. Grath fought with fury, every strike fueled by desperation to preserve the old ways. Varkesh fought with purpose. Every move measured, every step steady. At first, Grath's rage overwhelmed him. His blows rained down like thunder, forcing Varkesh back. But rage is blind, and soon it left openings. Varkesh exploited them with precision, striking not wildly but wisely. A parry here, a counter there, until Grath stumbled, his blade clattering to the ground. Varkesh held his staff above Grath's throat. The crowd roared, expecting the killing blow. But Varkesh did not strike. Instead, he cast the staff aside and extended his hand. His voice thundered across the field. "No more trophies, no more skulls. Today we prove strength another way. Rise, Grathbutt, rise, knowing that our path has changed." The silence that followed was heavier than battle. The clan stared, stunned. To defeat an enemy and not take his life, that went against everything they had been taught. Yet in that moment, they saw something greater. Varkesh had not only defeated Grath, he had mastered him without death. Grath roared in humiliation, but his body betrayed him. He could not rise against the truth. The old way had been broken. The clan turned their eyes to Varkesh, and for the first time, they did not cheer for blood. They bowed their heads in respect, not for a trophy, but for a leader who had chosen wisdom over destruction. The fall of Grath marked more than the end of a fight, it marked the end of an era. For centuries, the Hunter clan had lived by a single creed: take trophies, prove strength.
Out!
But now, before the eyes of the clan, Varkesh had shown a different kind of power, one that built instead of destroyed, one that endured instead of decayed. The clan gathered in a great circle around their leader. Their armor gleamed in the firelight, but their eyes, once filled with hunger for trophies, now held something new. Uncertainty, yes, but also possibility. Varkesh raised his staff, not as a weapon, but as a symbol of change. His voice carried across the silence. We have hunted for generations, but what have we gained? Skulls that rot, bones that crumble, stories that fade when the fire dies. But these humans, he gestured toward Carter and her team. They carry trophies that do not rot. They pass strength through knowledge, through memory, through creation. This is the path we must take. The words rippled through the clan. Some bowed their heads in agreement, their pride finally giving way. Others shifted uneasily, still bound to the old creed. But none could deny what they had seen: the machine that gave life. The book that carried voices from the past, the contests won not with claws but with minds. Carter stepped forward, her expression calm but hopeful. You do not have to abandon who you are, she said. You are hunters. But now, you can hunt for more than trophies. Hunt for knowledge. Hunt for discovery. Hunt for truths that will outlive even your greatest warriors. The hunters murmured at her words. Hunt for knowledge. It sounded strange, almost laughably. It resonated in their hearts. Hunting had always been their way of life. Perhaps it still could be, only transformed. Varkesh slammed his staff into the ground, sparks rising. From this day forward, the Hunter clan will take a new creed. No longer will we bring back bones to prove our strength. We will bring back knowledge. We will take not skulls, but lessons, not hides, but wisdom. These will be our trophies, and they will never fade. The clan roared not with the bloodthirsty hunger of old, but with a new fire, a roar of change. The sound echoed into the night sky, carrying with it the promise of transformation. Grath, beaten but alive, glared from the shadows. He would never accept this new path, but he no longer held the power to resist it. The clan had chosen, and the choice was irreversible. The hunters had come for trophies. They left with a creed, and humanity had given them the greatest gift of all, a future beyond blood. When the final test ended and the new creed was declared, the humans prepared one last gesture, a symbolic gift, to mark the change. The hunters gathered in the arena, their armor polished, their voices quiet. No one roared now. They were waiting, curious, uncertain, but open in a way they had never been before. Dr. Carter stepped forward, carrying a flat object wrapped in cloth. The hunters tensed, expecting a weapon or some strange device. Instead, she unwrapped it to reveal a framed sheet of paper. The markings were foreign to the hunters, yet the weight of the moment made it clear this was no ordinary scrap. This, Carter said, is called a diploma. Among humans, it is not given for killing, but for learning. It is a symbol not of conquest, but of growth. And today, we give it to you. A murmur ran through the clan, a paper trophy. At first it seemed absurd, but when Carter held it out, the gesture carried a weight even the fiercest warrior could feel. This was not prey cowering before predators. This was teachers honoring students. Varkesh stepped forward and accepted the diploma, its claws used to clutching skulls, and bones trembled slightly as they touched the smooth frame. He lifted it high for all to see. We came for trophies, he said, his voice deep and steady, and the humans gave us this. A trophy not of death, but of knowledge, a mark of strength that will never rot, never fade. The clan roared not the roar of hunters celebrating blood, but the roar of warriors acknowledging transformation. The sound carried pride, but pride of a new kind. For the first time, their honor came not from bones, but from wisdom. Grath spat in the dirt, his pride still burning, but even he could not stop the tide. The sight of Varkesh holding the diploma, the humans standing beside him without fear, and the clan roaring their approval was a moment carved forever into their history. Carter smiled. You wanted a trophy? I gave you a diploma. Take it. And remember that the greatest victories are not over others, but over ignorance. The hunters bowed their heads, something they had never done before, not in submission but in respect. The humans had turned the hunt into a lesson, and the hunters had left as students reborn. The diploma, fragile in form, but indestructible in meaning, became the most honored symbol in the clan's history.
Oh, beast, no.
No skull, no blade had ever carried such weight. It was not just a gift. It was proof that even the fiercest predators could change. The day finally came when the hunters prepared to leave Earth. Their ships, which had once descended like harbingers of doom, now stood waiting, as vessels of return, carrying not trophies of flesh, but the fragile yet powerful gift of knowledge. The humans gathered at the landing site, watching as the hunters loaded supplies, books, and devices Carter's team had entrusted to them. No skulls or hides decorated their ships this time. Instead, the glowing library devices sat in armored cases. And at the heart of Varkesh's flagship, the framed diploma rested on a pedestal of honor. The clan was restless, not with hunger but with anticipation. They whispered of what awaited them on their homeworld. Some feared ridicule. What would other clans say when they saw warriors return without bones, but with books? Others were excited, imagining the strength knowledge could bring. Varkesh stood before his people, his voice carrying over the roar of the engines. We came to this world seeking prey. We leave it having found teachers. Our walls will no longer hold skulls, but wisdom. Our songs will not only honor battles, but lessons. We will not abandon our pride, we will redefine it. The hunters roared, the sound echoing with a new purpose. Carter stepped forward, her eyes meeting Varkesh. Remember, she said, the true hunt never ends. But now you will hunt for knowledge, for understanding, for growth. Carry that with you, and you will never be defeated. Varkesh bowed his head not as a predator, but as an equal. We will remember, he rumbled. We will return not as hunters of prey, but as seekers of truth. The ramps closed, the ships lifted, and the skies trembled once more. But this time, the people of Earth did not watch in fear. They watched with hope, knowing they had turned predators into students, enemies into allies. High above, the hunter fleet vanished into the stars. Inside their ships, warriors who had once measured themselves in blood now studied diagrams, whispered lessons, and argued not about trophies, but about equations and discoveries. They still roared, but their roars were now mixed with wonder. At the center of Varkesh's ship, the diploma gleamed under the soft glow of starlight. It was fragile, yes, but in its fragile frame lay the most powerful trophy the hunters had ever carried. It was a reminder that true strength was not in what you could take, but in what you could learn. The hunters had come as predators. They left as pioneers. And in the silence of the departing fleet, the galaxy itself seemed to shift, as though it too sensed that a new kind of hunt had begun, one that would never end. Years passed after the hunters left Earth, but the impact of their visit rippled across the galaxy. Among the stars, whispers spread not of another conquest, not of another bloody hunt, but of something stranger, almost unthinkable. The hunter clan, feared for centuries as predators, had returned home with no skulls, no hides, no trophies. Instead, they carried books, machines, and a single fragile object humans called a diploma. At first, the other clans laughed. They mocked Varkesh's people, calling them weak, calling them broken by prey. But laughter faded when they saw what followed. The hunters began to change. Their ships, once crude engines of war, became faster, sleeker, powered by human-taught designs. Their medicine advanced, saving warriors once doomed to die. Their agriculture flourished, feeding entire cities instead of just hunting parties. And for the first time in their history, the hunters began to write not in blood, but in ink, recording lessons, discoveries, and stories of creation instead of destruction. Varkesh himself became a legend. Not for the beasts he killed, but for the knowledge he carried. He was remembered as the leader who broke tradition without breaking his people, the one who proved that strength was not limited to claws or blades. In his hall, where once skulls would have hung, he placed the diploma at the center. Warriors bowed before it, not as prey, but as proof that their clan had grown beyond death. Generations later, young hunters were taught a new creed. The greatest hunt is not for bones, but for truth. The greatest trophies are not taken, but learned. Their children grew up not fearing weakness, but fearing ignorance. And slowly, clan by clan, the old ways began to fade. Meanwhile on Earth, the humans remembered too. They told the story of the day predators came for trophies and left with a diploma. It became a tale of courage, of resilience, of how knowledge could turn even the fiercest enemy into a student. Children learned it as a reminder that strength does not always come from size or force, it comes from ideas. The galaxy watched, other species took notice. If even the hunters could change, what else was possible? Wars paused, rivalries cooled, and for a brief moment, hope spread that maybe knowledge could do what armies never could: unite instead of divide. In the end, the hunters had gained a trophy greater than any skull. They had gained a legacy that whispered across worlds, carried in books, in voices, in stars, that true strength is not what you conquer, but what you learn, share, and leave behind. The diploma still sat in Varkesh's hall, fragile as paper yet stronger than steel. For long after bones had turned to dust, it remained a reminder that even the fiercest hunters could be taught. And even the most fragile gift could reshape the stars. The transformation of the hunter clan did not remain confined to their homeworld. Word spread quickly across the galactic network, carried by traders, scouts, and whispers in the markets of distant stars. At first, most dismissed the tales as impossible. How could the fiercest predators of the galaxy, the ones who had decorated their halls with the bones of titans, suddenly abandon trophies for books and devices? Surely it was a trick, a rumor planted by the humans to elevate their reputation. But doubt crept in when other clans began to notice the changes. The hunter fleet, once feared for raids, now sailed into starports offering trade, not bloodshed. Their warriors still bore scars and armor, but alongside blades they carried datapads, diagrams, and inventions built on the seeds of human knowledge. They no longer came seeking prey, they came seeking teachers, allies, and ideas. This shift rattled the balance of the galaxy. Species who had long feared the hunters began to cautiously open dialogue. A world once plundered for its beasts now welcomed hunter envoys to learn its technologies. Entire planets that had lived in fear suddenly found themselves being astronaut threatened for wisdom. But not everyone was pleased. Rival clans, still clinging to the old ways, saw this as betrayal. "Hunters do not beg," one rival chieftain snarled. "They take." Varkesh has poisoned his bloodline with weakness. Murmurs of rebellion and war rippled. Some feared that a clan of thinkers might be even more dangerous than a clan of killers. Back on Earth, Carter and her team followed the ripples of change with cautious optimism. Through the galactic channels, they heard reports of hunters building instead of burning, of warriors debating ideas in their halls, of children learning to read before they learned to kill. Humanity's gamble had worked, but Carter knew change was fragile. "It is only a beginning," she told her colleagues. "The seeds are planted, but whether they grow depends on them." For Varkesh, the struggle was not over. His people respected him, yes, but old traditions died slowly. Elders whispered doubts. Young warriors wrestled between pride and progress. May and Grath still festered in the shadows, his influence smaller but not extinguished. Every step forward required battles not of claws, but of hearts and minds. Yet Varkesh carried the diploma as his shield and knowledge as his spear. The galaxy had begun to change, but it was only the beginning of a much larger hunt-to-hunt that stretched not across forests or mountains, but across time itself. Decades later, the story of the humans and the hunters became legend. Across the galaxy, storytellers recounted the day when predators descended on Earth, demanding trophies, only to leave with a diploma. Some told it as a parable of humility, others as a tale of transformation, but all agreed it marked a turning point in history. On the hunter's homeworld, children no longer carved bones into necklaces. Instead, they carved words into tablets, recording discoveries and lessons. They still trained with weapons. Old traditions did not vanish overnight, but alongside their physical strength, they honed their minds. A warrior was no longer measured only by the skulls he carried, but also by the ideas he could share. Varkesh lived long enough to see his people change. His hall, once meant for trophies, became a library filled with books, scrolls, and glowing archives. The diploma hung at the center, untouched, honored more than any skull had ever been. To the hunters, it became more than paper. It became sacred, a reminder of the day they stopped being predators and began being seekers. Even after Varkesh passed into legend, his creed endured. The greatest hunt is not for prey, but for knowledge. His successors carried this banner proudly, turning their clan into explorers, scientists, and ambassadors. Where once their ships cast shadows of fear, now they brought light, hope, and curiosity. And yet, the hunt was not over. For the hunters discovered that knowledge was endless. Every question answered opened another. Every lesson learned revealed new mysteries. The universe stretched before them like an infinite forest, each star a trail to be tracked, each world a quarry to be pursued, not for trophies, but for truths. On Earth, humanity continued its own journey, ever curious, ever restless. The bond between humans and hunters grew, transforming from one of survival into one of partnership. Together, they shared discoveries, charted uncharted systems, and pushed the boundaries of what life could achieve when strength and knowledge walked hand in hand. The hunters had once believed their walls of bone would prove their greatness. But bones crumble, dust scatters, and trophies fade. Knowledge, however, endured. It could not be burned, broken, or stolen, not truly. Once learned, it lived forever in the minds of those who carried it. And so the hunters embraced a new truth. They were still hunters, yes, but no longer hunters of flesh. They were hunters of wisdom, of secrets buried in the stars, of truths waiting in the darkness of space. The eternal hunt had begun, and this time, it would never end.